Thank you so much. À l'instar des 1001 nuits, mon cher ami, l'ambassadeur Abadi, je vous dis 1001 merci pour avoir conduit nos discussions dans le Conseil de sécurité avec beaucoup de succès. I would like to start by welcoming my dear friend, the Special Envoy, Bيدرسون, for his presence, his participation, and as well as his briefing. Mr. President, a few days ago, specifically on August the 31st, 2020, meaning during the last day of the Indonesian presidency, the Security Council voted on a draft resolution on combating terrorism. This draft resolution was supposed to contribute to addressing one of the weaknesses and close an important gap in this field by calling on member states of our international organization to repatriate, prosecute, or rehabilitate their nationals of terrorists without border, or what some like to call foreign terrorist fighters, and ridding the countries in which these terrorists are active of their evils and crimes. It was really a pitiful situation that the Council was obligated to vote on such an important draft resolution. Unfortunately, the negotiation process on that draft resolution confirmed that some European countries represented in this Council have adhered to their selfish and irresponsible position of rejecting to repatriate and hold accountable their nationals of hardened terrorists. These countries have also persisted in their unethical attempts to evade their relevant responsibilities, to our great dissatisfaction. It is well known to everyone that my country, Syria, has been targeted over the past years by a brutal terrorist war, unprecedented terrorist war, in which governments of known countries have recruited foreign terrorist fighters and provided them with various forms of support and facilitated their infiltration into my country, mainly through our common borders with Turkey, to destabilize Syria's security and stability and undermine its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and its role in the region, and to pave the way for the perpetration of acts of aggression and occupation under the delusional pretext of fighting ISIS. How could somebody pretend fighting ISIS while he is the one who created ISIS? We'll come back to this later. Mr. President, my delegation reiterates its condemnation and categorical rejection of the selective approach adopted by the governments of some member states regarding the issue of confronting the threat posed by terrorism to international peace and security. These very same governments consider terrorism a legitimate tool in which to invest as long as it does not target their countries, and describe the terrorists as a moderate armed Syrian opposition, or non-state armed groups, or revolutionaries, or jihadists, and this is the favorite word for the French delegation, or freedom fighters, who do not pose any threat to peace and security for any country or region of the whole world, provided that they never think of returning to their countries of origin to continue spreading democracy and human rights there. Consequently, Western governments that have been consistently flooding some poor and developing countries with their nuclear and non-nuclear waste to protect their local environment from pollution are bent on flooding certain countries with their human waste of terrorists, extremists, mercenaries, and murderers after they used them to target certain countries, including my own. What confirms the relevance of what we say is that some Western governments still refuse to repatriate their terrorists, together with their families and children. Here we are talking about 72,000 projects, designs of a future terrorist. They are all located in one camp in my country, Al-Hol camp, under the supervision of the American forces of occupation with their separatist militias. So we know the address very well, and we know the story very well, and we are sharing this story with you. They are also taking illegal and illegitimate measures to evade their responsibilities for and duties toward their nationals, including repatriating, prosecuting, or rehabilitating them. We have seen during the past years a British effort, for example, but not limited to revoke the nationality of British terrorists operating in my country. If they even dare think of going back to the UK. And the same thing happened in other countries. The Belgian government, which shares with Germany, holding the so-called humanitarian pen, and claims to be concerned about the humanitarian situation in my country, refused, both Germany and Belgium, refused to take back the Belgian wives of ISIS fighters, refused to take back the Belgian wives of ISIS fighters, and was content with expressing its readiness to receive children exclusively under the age of 10, despite the decisions issued by the Belgian judiciary demanding that children not be separated from their mothers. What a hypocrisy. Mr. President, in the reports of the Secretary General and reports of the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team of the Security Council Committee, established pursuant to Resolution 1267 of 1999, the United Nations confirmed the existence of tens of thousands of terrorist fighters who came to my country from more than 100 member states. The International Counterterrorism Center in The Hague indicated years ago that there are around 4,300 European terrorists fighting in Syria and Iraq. Among them, 2,838 terrorists from France, Belgium, Britain, and Germany, 4 members of the Security Council, meaning more than 700 terrorists for each of the 4 countries that I mentioned, all of which are currently members of the Security Council and NATO. Of course, these numbers have been manipulated and reduced to cover up the practices of the governments of the 4 countries against my country. Our statistics as Syrian government are much more than that. My delegation reaffirms that the success of any political solution of the crisis, restoring security and stability to the entirety of the Syrian Arab Republic, and improving the humanitarian situation demands combating terrorism, and that the concerned governments repatriate their cannibalistic from Idlib, which is controlled by Al-Nusra Front and its affiliated multi-labeled and multifaceted entities. These governments must also withdraw their monsters from Al-Hol camp that is run by American occupation forces and their affiliated separatist militias, and avoid making this issue the subject of barter or suspicious deals aimed at trying to legitimize or recognize those militias involved in smuggling some ISIS terrorists or children to neighboring countries, as happened a few days ago when more than 25 children were suffocated and poisoned after consuming excessive doses of sleeping drugs during preparations to smuggle them through water tanks and boxes out of Al-Hol camp. Of course, we have never heard about this in any briefing to the Council, and CNN and Fox News did not speak about it, and all European channels did not report it. I do not want to name the Western countries and others that paid huge sums of money to the armed separatist militias in exchange of having back some children or terrorists, in addition to the political statements they issued in favor of these militias. Mr. President, as we thank our colleague, the Permanent Representative of Indonesia, for his efforts during the negotiations process related to the draft resolution on repatriating, prosecuting, and rehabilitating terrorists without border, my country demands that the efforts of the Security Council to adopt an alternative and firm draft resolution under the 7th chapter of the Charter be continued. Such a draft resolution would oblige member states to cooperate to eliminate the phenomenon of foreign terrorist fighters and to ensure the commitment of the governments of the concerned countries to repatriate their nationals and hold them accountable for their crimes and take deterrent measures against them in order to fulfill their share of the international effort to rid the whole world of the scourge of terrorism. I would like to draw your kind attention to the availability of information indicating that a number of terrorist members of the White Helmets and Hayat Tahrir Sham terrorist organizations, under the supervision of some Turkish officers, are working to prepare for the commission of a new chemical crime in the coming days in the city of Ariha and the Basamis area in northwestern Syria. They have also prepared the crime scene, kidnapped a number of children, prepared some of the hostages and detainees to use them in their crime in order to lay charges on the Syrian Arab army and provide the pretext to openly occupy the city of Idlib and its countryside and target all Syrian airports. Mr. President, the Syrian government renews its commitment to the political solution that is Syrian-led, Syrian-owned, without any foreign interference, and that is facilitated by the United Nations, with the indisputable commitment and firm respect of all member states inside and outside this Council to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic. The Syrian government also reaffirms that it continues to work on combating terrorism and restoring all Syrian territories, therefore achieving security, stability, and prosperity for the Syrian people. The Syrian government also reminds of the need to fully adhere to the terms of reference and rules of work of the Constitutional Committee, and that there should be no foreign interference in its work or attempting to impose artificial timetables or deadlines for its work. Mr. President, you have all heard the American President Donald Trump confirming days ago that his administration was planning to assassinate the president of the Syrian Arab Republic. This confirms the level of which this administration's reckless political thinking and behavior have descended. Here I pose a question to His Excellency the Secretary General and to administrations and to you, colleagues, in this Council. The question is, when it comes to the US administration's claims of support for a peaceful political solution to the crisis in my country, that is facilitated by the United Nations. Does such a hostile American position directed against the head of a member state of this organization make any sense at all? Mr. President, I have noticed that my colleague, the representative of the UK, has incarnated the spirit of the Sherlock Holmes instead of taking Shakespeare's wisdom into heart and follow his ethical advice that is good for all times and places. It is not enough for a man to weave a story full of lies, misleading, and prejudice. Rather, what is required is that the story be real, beneficial, and that it provides logical solutions for absurd scenarios. The history of British politics is not something to be proud of, nor is it anyone's role model. The present times confirm that history, particularly when the public recently took to the streets in British cities, destroying the status of slave traders who kidnapped millions of innocent Africans from their homes and transferred them in the journeys of utmost torture to the American continent. The most prominent of these British traders of torture is Edward Colston, whose statue was toppled down in Bristol City just a couple months ago. So please stop preaching others and learn from your own history. I thank you, Mr. President.